I'm here today with Steve Fogg. Now, Steve is known to many people for his work with online ministry, not only here in Australia, but around the world. So, Steve, welcome today. We really appreciate you giving some time so we can really tap into some information about online ministry.
Tim, it's great to be with you and everyone else in the Exponential family today.
So tell us about your background in online ministry.
Yeah, my background really started, I was serving at a church called Crossway here in Melbourne, Crossway Baptist, and it's kind of started in about 2007, where I saw the impact of a church website, basically.
Yeah.
And from there, there's a product called Google Analytics, and it was just a fascination around data. And we could see at that time that 80% of people who visited our church website were new visitors. So it kind of started to tease out my curiosity in terms of, well, who are those people? What's their story? How's God at work in their life? And can we get them back and have a conversation? But of course, at that time, it's completely anonymous. It's very hard to do that.
Yeah.
It was very much Web 1.0 kind of coming into 2.0 at the time. And then this little platform called Facebook was born.
I think I've heard of that.
Yeah, similar sort of time. And a friend who attended Crossway at the time, I was the communications director at the time at Crossway, and he said, oh, look, I've started this thing called a Facebook group. You probably should be in charge of it because I've called it Crossway. And I went, oh, okay. Checked it out, and he'd already got 400 people in this group, and I went, oh, okay, better kind of take charge of this because it's under our brand, and then promptly closed it down, and then started a Facebook page, and then that led to my curiosity of actually. There's a structural opportunity here for us as churches, in that what Facebook is allowing me to do and Crossway to do is to directly connect with the person, and I can see that person wherever they are in the world. But also, so I'm avoiding the normal kind of barrier in terms of kind of communicating with the world online, which is either I've got to go through a mainstream TV, radio network, or I've got to go through another online ministry of some kind, like a online TV or something, which was very early on in those days. So there are a lot of gatekeepers, essentially.
Yeah, okay.
And what online ministry really, the big shift has been, you can actually directly connect with the person in person. There's no barrier.
Just on a big shift, Steve, tell us about the last 15 months or so with the pandemic. How has that brought about big shifts? What kind of changes do you see that's brought about in terms of online ministry?
Oh gosh, I think so. March last year, I think it was March or just before end of Feb, March. When we started to hear about this virus thing, and and at the time I was in a lead marketing role. And all of a sudden, so I was back in the marketplace, and all of a sudden I got all these churches starting to contact me saying, how do you do online ministry? And I just thought, and I started to have Zoom calls like this with just pastors all over the world, because I still blog about it. And so they were contacting me about it. And I thought, okay, there's some so the initial phase was very much, well, what do we do? Like camera, audio, lighting, just the essential basics that churches are actually quite well equipped for anyway in a live scenario. But what does that look like online, and how do we get ourselves online? So it's very much a reactive kind of position that churches took. There was no real, if I look back on the last 15 months, really, that churches have pretty much said, okay, we now efficiently can do online what we did in person. Yes. We can create a broadcast. We can do what we did in the room, but we can just put it online. What I think churches have missed, though, is the opportunity for a plan or a model. And just like you would have if you're a mega church, or if you're a regional church, or if you're a local church, you've got a model of ministry or a plan. So if we think about the 1980s, there was very much that Peter C. Wagner kind of church growth movement that came through.
Yep.
That no churches, well, I say no, very few churches are thinking about what model should we adopt? What philosophy? What's the end goal? They're just putting something out online and thinking that they've solved the problem. But it actually, church online and ministry online can really both impact people online wherever they are in the world. So churches around, in Australia, I'm sure everyone's got that anecdote of someone somewhere randomly tuning in from another country, which is great. So it gives you an inkling of the potential.
Yes.
But they've not got a plan of, well, how do we follow that person up? How do we connect with them? How do we disciple them? And how do we grow that congregation online? So there's no real plan in place. It's kind of a holding pattern.
So what you're really saying is that churches, instead of actually doing the hard work in terms of the thinking and the design, they tended to morph their product into being an online product. But there was no real plan to go along with that. And so the service became online, but the real work of making disciples, there wasn't a lot of thought in relation to that.
Yeah, I think a lot of people have gone, we need to serve our existing community and we need some sort of continuity plan. And this is, or survival plan for some. And let's just do this instead. And whether it's a Zoom call, whether it's streamed through Facebook, or whether it's church online platform, whatever that is, it's pretty much been business as usual in terms of the service and the way the service looks and feels. And there's 4 songs, and there's announcements, and there's a 40-minute message, and there's another song, and someone wraps up a service. So it's an hour-and-a-half service. That's not changed. And unfortunately, that needs to change.
It does.
Because online our attention spans are much, much shorter. And, so just apart from those kind of fundamental format questions, which I know some churches are starting to look at, it's very much let's just put it online. Let's just, and let's, the challenges that churches have had with audio and sound are pretty much, at the start of the pandemic, you'd listen, if you had your headphones on, you kind of go, oh, okay. And they're now learning, they're improving their technique and their sound desk and all that sort of stuff. But still, there's no model. And what does discipleship look like?
So let's take it a little bit further even. One of the things that I was quite critical of at the time when we all just went online was the fact that if you look at innovation theory, most churches were actually doing adaptation. In other words, they were looking at the product that they currently produced and working out that they were practicing adaptation and how you took it to the users. Very few churches were doing innovation by design, which is actually looking at who you want to reach and designing a product with that in mind, and then working backwards. And I think if we had had more people doing innovation by design, we would have seen a lot more creativity coming out than just having the churches taking what they're already doing and putting it online. Now, what about church plants? Have you seen church plants innovate at all with how they've used online?
Yeah, look, during the pandemic, a lot of church plants, so, I now serve a city on a hill. We have church plants on the Gold Coast, on the Surf Coast, and now in Wollongong. And, for various reasons, some have gone ahead, some have paused, and now are reactivating as we're kind of coming out of in Australia. But as an opportunity for churches to plant churches, whether you're starting out as a pastor and you're just bringing that kind of core group of people together, there's an opportunity online. Much more in that earlier phase, it's about building a core team. So you can use digital marketing to build that core team. So that's what we're doing at City on a Hill, for example. In Wollongong, the content that we're putting out in Wollongong is to build that core team for people that are looking to join a church that's just starting out. But there's much broader application for that for church plants. I've seen in the last couple of years, even pre-pandemic, a friend, Angela Craig, in the US, she planted a church on Facebook, and she grew that to about, in the thousands but you don't see it, but it's there. And they were all about discipleship. And while it had big numbers, it was people talking with people like this in small groups online. Another church that was planted, online church that was planted out of a church in the US, you can Google it, it's just called Church Anywhere. And a good friend has planted that out. So it's a separate brand to their planting church now. And they have incredible ministry across the United States.
So are you familiar with any Australian churches that have planted online?
I'm familiar with, so as a separate church plant or as a separate plant, I'm familiar with one in northern New South Wales, but I forget the name of it. And from a format point of view, they put a lot of consideration into, I think it's out of
Haven Together out of Catalyst Church. That's a great example.
Yeah, so that will probably be the only kind of online only version I've seen in Australia.
Right, okay.
But I don't really know their story. I've just, checked their website out online.
Yeah, no, Thomas Anderson is a gentleman who's leading that, and he's doing a great job. And it's based out of Catalyst Church in Ipswich, but he's trying to develop a totally new online congregation, which is exciting to see. It's exciting watching his progress.
Yeah, and look, I checked into one of their, I don't even know if you call it a service, but it was much more like an interview.
Yes.
Again, the format was changed. And they obviously that innovation in the format versus most churches go, well, we need songs, we need, a 35-minute preach or whatever, and some sort of altar call at the end, which in itself is bad, but it's stuck in a mode.
Yeah. I know the church that I'm involved in leading in Launceston, Tasmania, Tauros Community Church. When the pandemic happened, we decided not to put our normal service online. We decided, we looked at probably what were the key reasons why people were attracted to the church. And we saw the ability to discuss in everyday language biblical issues. And so we then started having conversations every week as we went through the Sermon on the Mount. And we found that actually attracted a new audience. It maintained the old audience, but also it attracted quite a significant new audience that enabled us to launch Alpha Online. Now, with Alpha Online, you must be interested in seeing the success that that's actually had.
Yeah, well, we've run Alpha Online at City on a Hill, and so we do Facebook ads for Alpha Online.
Yep.
So so the mindset I'd just say to everybody is get outside of that ministry mindset, especially if you're a larger church. You've probably got someone who's got a communications role in there. Generally, that mindset is we want to communicate everything that's going on in the life of the church to the church. But if you flip that on the head, which is what I love about Alpha, for example, is that you can let the whole city know about Alpha online. So you can run ads for that. We run ads for that at City on a Hill. So we know how much it costs for someone to register. And out of all those that register, a certain percentage of those turn up. But the cool thing about Alpha Online, of course, is that you just need to switch Zoom on. And that's it. The challenge is, how do people find out about it?
Yep.
Unless they see that kind of disruptive ad on Facebook. What are the other ways that they find out, or are in that kind of zone where they're asking life's big questions? And often that is in Google or YouTube.
Yes.
So Tim, for example, you talked about answering common questions in everyday language. In Google, for example, nearly every month, 250,000 people ask the question, does God exist? They type that into the search engine. Does God exist? And the question I just say to every church, are you answering the right sort of questions in the right place? Because that's the great opportunity going forward, is to look into the mind of the person who's spiritually seeking and start answering the questions that they already have, because they're not looking for exegesis on the Gospels at all. What they're looking for is everyday language, answers to their everyday problems.
That's it.
And that's, you do that in person, but it also happens online every single second of every single minute of every single day. all day, every day. And, I could list out, we're coming up to Christmas, different kind of questions get asked at different types of times. So, with Christmas coming up, if you're an existing church, for example, people are, if they're thinking of attending a church, which is a small cohort of the community, they will be typing in church services, and Google will show them the churches near them, or Christmas church services.
Yes.
And again, that's a certain percentage of the cohort. But other cohorts will be asking is Jesus real? Or was Jesus really born? Or, what's the manger? And that's really the big opportunity that churches seem to miss. We seem to miss those types of questions.
So Steve, do you think then that existing churches with established congregations, they're concentrating more on the questions that their congregations are asking, whereas the opportunity for really broadening our reach is to actually ask the questions, to discover the questions that people out there in the community are actually asking?
I think often the questions are similar, but they're just put in a different way.
Yes.
Yes. And I think it's a question of translation. And so, a parent is still concerned about how do they raise up their child, or someone that's married is still concerned about, how to have a healthy marriage. It's just we ask and answer those questions in church in different ways, and we put we sometimes put Christianese over the top of that, versus in the community. If someone's searching for that sort of answer to their question, they'll go to YouTube, or they'll go to Google, and they will ask those sorts of questions. So it's a little bit of we get lost in translation sometimes in that kind of post-Christian culture.
That's a great comment. So Steve, what does the future of online ministry look like in your mind?
So I think the big thing is our models of church are changing. I think the big model that we've lived in the last 30 or 40 years of come on Sunday, this is your Sunday morning or Sunday afternoon, or whatever that looks like for you in your church. I think we're going through a significant reset. We've gone through it. We've kind of had this strange season of just hopping onto your couch and your PJs with your cup of coffee, switching in to church just because that's all there is. And that's only right now, probably here in Melbourne at least, a very small cohort of people. Because people, honestly, Tim, people are sick of it. Like, I'm the online guy, and I want real people. I want flesh on flesh, right? Yeah. I really just want to get back to my friends and my family and all that sort of stuff. So we're in a kind of an unusual season right now, but I believe that our future is a hybrid future. And the churches that adapt to a hybrid model of ministry will be the churches that persevere, that grow online. Because people, like you said, with that online alpha, people don't need to go and commit a whole lot night out now to do something. It's not a big commitment of 10 weeks. It's 10 hours where they hop in online. Some of them can remain as anonymous as they want, to get the answers to the questions that they're looking for. So whether that's an alpha, whether that's a parenting seminar, whether that's a marriage seminar, whether that's a Christian that attends a church and they're wanting to go further in their discipleship, there are going to be places and spaces where online ministry will really thrive and grow. Yes. There'll be places where face-to-face contact is almost at a premium. So the pendulum is really, at least in Melbourne, not down where you are, but in Melbourne, it's way over online at the moment. It's going to swing back, but the reality is we can't lose the gains that we've made in this big digital transformation of the last 15 months. Yes. And there's a great cartoon that a guy called Mark Toonist, and he does cartoons for marketing, and he posted it in March last year, and it's some guys in a random office building with a wrecking ball outside coming towards them that said, digital transformation. And they're going, and the little speech bubble is saying, digital transformation, we don't need that. And it's just coming in to wreck their world. So if you swap those business people out for people who serve in the church, it's the same sort of an impact that we've had in the last we've had this massive sweeping digital transformation happen in the lives of all of us who lead and serve in churches and paraministries and charities. We can't lose the opportunity that's come to the table. We need to have a plan for the future. We need to have a model of the future. And I think that model is a hybrid future. And the churches that recognize that, especially the power of online, as we come out of kind of this very much lockdown feeling, they're going to really grow and thrive.
Yeah. So I've heard it said that as we come out of this season in time, in terms of in person, the face-to-face contact that we had, we need to look at two things. One is that what is it that helped us grow our churches in the first place, and to focus on those things. And the second is, what is it that we can't, that we can do in person, but we can't do it online? And that's probably the greater of the two different factors. Flipping that around, what do you see that we need to continue to do online that we'll be able to do better online than in person?
I think there's a lot of things that we do midweek at night that we can do online. And we can do it in a hybrid way. So if I take an example of a midweek service or a midweek Bible teaching, some people might tune in online, but some people might just choose to attend. Depending, we've got to enter into this new paradigm where, in this hybrid reality, that churches have got to give people options. If we want people to take a step in a discipleship journey, we've got to make it more accessible. So if all the church leaders I talk to say something like this to me, Steve, in our ministry, since we've jumped online, especially with our leaders, we've had more leaders attend online than ever showed up in the building. And I'm going, well, that's like a well-done moment. You've just realized the power of online. So it's about picking and choosing the right opportunities, but also not being able to be afraid of testing and seeing which is the best opportunity, because there'll be moments in our future for ministry where it might be online only, but there'll be moments where it'll be a bit of both. And we've got to give ourselves the grace and the room to test and to fail and succeed. And I think churches, if I go back to 5 years ago when we started Crossway's online ministry, Crossway was incredibly open to me doing this, and that was incredible at the time, incredibly empowering and freeing. And I think in the same way, churches need to look at that next year. 2022 is a year, and beyond that, of really just let those digital natives explore ministry online and in person. Really just play. And I think God's going to do some incredible things if we allow that to happen.
No, that's fantastic. Steve, just want to thank you very much for your input today. You've got a lot of wisdom that I'm sure a lot of people will be able to take great heart from.
Yeah, thanks, Tim.